thank you guys for joining the video for today. We have some very interesting stuff to share with you guys, and here we have the Brett Garlinghouse on the Young Presidents Organization interview during Davos WEF 23. Now, this is a very interesting video, guys, where Brett Garlinghouse breaks down why Ripple is different than FTX, and about Swift, and about the SEC case. Now, it's a long video, it's 9 minutes, but I want to break it down with you guys. We want to see what Brett Garlinghouse says, because there are some very interesting points that he makes. So this will maybe be a two-part video, or we will just dig in this video, see how far we get, guys. Let's dig in.
Economic Forum at Davos, and I have the pleasure of having with me Brad Garlinghouse, the CEO of Ripple. Brad, thank you for being with us.
Absolutely, glad to be here. Thank you for coming to the Ripple temporary office.
Brad, listen, it would be, I guess, a big mistake of me not to start with what is in the minds of everybody, is topical, everybody's talking about it, so let's address it. FTX. There's a collapse, there's crypto involved. How is Ripple different?
Well, so I view Ripple as dramatically different, and actually, maybe I'll start by describing how I think about the FTX collapse. You know, first of all, I don't even think of the FTX collapse as a crypto issue. It's a fraud. Whether you're dealing with crypto assets, or as Bernie Madoff was dealing with lots of different assets, or maybe he didn't have assets, I don't know. But, you know, fraud is fraud, and, you know, I don't know all the details of FTX, and of course the court process will play out. But Ripple is dramatically different in that at the core, we're an enterprise software company. We're selling bank infrastructure that uses blockchain technology to dramatically improve cross-border payments. So today, many of us are very familiar with, you know, what generally is called a SWIFT transfer, a wire transfer. You know, interestingly, by the way, the word wire transfer, the history of that refers to a telegraph wire. Click, 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 click. That's how we were transferring money, and we still hang on to that language. Why is it that it's slow and expensive to send money across borders when I can send an email anywhere in the world for free, anytime? And really, money's just ones and zeros at this point. Ripple selling technologies allow banks, financial institutions to send cross-border payments instantly, very low cost. So as compared to FTX, you know, it's kind of apples and oranges.
Very good, and very nice to hear. You touched upon Swift, so let's go there. Is Swift a competitor?
Now, before we dig in that question, guys, which is very interesting, is Swift a competitor? You can clearly see what Brett Garlinghouse is saying here. He's saying that they are selling banking infrastructure. What does that mean, guys? Does that mean they are here to replace banks? Listen carefully to what he's saying, and you will have all the answers, because he's literally saying that they are selling banking infrastructure. So in other words, they are trying to complete the banking system. They're not trying to replace it, because that's a different thing. If you are going to replace banking, you are going at war with some of the most powerful people. You do not want that. And Brett Garlinghouse understands that, and that's not the point of Ripple. A lot of people think that Ripple is going to replace banking and replace everything. It is not about that. They are providing the infrastructure, like many others, by the way. But Ripple is just the most advanced, right, at this moment. So let's dig in the second question, guys, which is Ripple a Swift competitor?
Is Swift something that in a future scenario you would see working with? And what about, you know, transfers that happen through platforms like a Revolut or a WeChat?
Yeah. So Ripple decided early on that we wanted to be at kind of the infrastructure layer, and there's a whole bunch of strategic issues associated with that. One of them, quite frankly, is that if you work with regulated endpoints, that's where all the regulatory frameworks apply. KYC, know your customer, AML, anti-money laundering, all the acronyms. If you work just with regulated endpoints, they're making sure that that is the case. Companies like WeChat have to do that regulatory work themselves. Now Swift, I mean, Swift is kind of a competitor. It's slightly more complicated than that, because Swift is really just messaging. When you send a Swift transfer, it's not liquidity. You're actually sending bank messages to banks that have liquidity. So
listen carefully what he's saying here, guys. This is so important. This is the most important thing on this whole interview, what he's saying here.
to some degree, Citibank and HSBC, really the top two, JPM, those are the top three liquidity banks. And when you're sending SWIFT messages, you're sending messages to banks to release liquidity and making sure the debits and credits match. So to some degree, really boil it down, Ripple's competing with the liquidity of Citi and the messaging of SWIFT, but in one, because we're both messaging and liquidity.
They're both messaging and liquidity. So they put together the messaging system of SWIFT in a more efficient way, and they have also the liquidity of the banks. So can you see here, guys, that this is not a thing about working with Ripple, working with SWIFT or replacing SWIFT. It is just doing things more efficiently in an existing environment, which is key, guys, which is really key.
And at the end of the day, again, as I described, SWIFT was developed 50 plus years ago. It architecturally hasn't really changed. It does remain slow, days. It does remain, relatively speaking, expensive. And actually, interestingly, it's quite error prone. And part of that is just, it's a one-way messaging protocol. So if I fat finger Tassos and I put one S instead of two in the middle, I guess you have three S's, but that will bounce back. They'll say, no, that account name doesn't match that person. That's an error. Now, if you use modern technology, you would get a real time, you're typing in Tassos an account number, you get a real time, okay, does that account match? Oh, I mistyped, I fat fingered that name. So the efficiency, we see, instead of a 6% error rate as reported for SWIFT, you see, 10 bips of error, so 99.9% effective. So we think these are better technologies that can be applied broadly to the vast majority of, frankly, all of the banking system by selling it as a wholesaler, if you will. And therefore, if we don't compete with the WeChats, WeChat could be a customer of ours.
You touched upon something that I think is very relevant and something we've heard a lot about, and that's regulation, right? You look at crypto, and if I look back, crypto started as something that was more anti-regulation, anti-system following the financial crisis of '08, and yet you are an advocate of regulation. How do you reconcile these two?
When I first got exposed to crypto, there's no question that the perspective was anti-government. Bitcoin kind of came from that heritage, and I always thought these are amazing technologies. But if you wanted to have the broadest impact for the broadest population, you needed to work with the system and work with governments and work with regulators. So for really since the beginning of Ripple's life, we've been engaging regulators globally. And that has, I think, been to our benefit for sure, in lots of different jurisdictions. The United States, interestingly, is really behind lots of other countries. And here in Davos, I made the argument to the various sessions around crypto that we spend too much time talking about the U.S. regulatory framework because it's quite a bit behind countries like the UK or Japan. Well, certainly Switzerland was early and aggressive in codifying and being specific about what the regulatory framework for crypto would look like. And when you're clear about the framework, that allows entrepreneurs and investment capital to flow in because it reduces risk. When you don't know what that looks like, if you're an entrepreneur, one of the first pieces of advice I give people is don't start your company in the United States at this point until the rules are clear. Most crypto entrepreneurs, I find, they want to follow the rules of the road, but if you don't know what the rules of the road are, that makes it hard.
You make them up or you don't know where to be.
Yeah. So
very interesting, guys, right? So you follow what he's saying. All of this is just making sense right now. If you look at this, guys, what does that mean for Ripple? Ripple is literally, guys, one of a kind. There is no other cryptocurrency backed by such an enterprise, which is searching for regulation, which is transparent, which is changing a $1 trillion issue, right? And solving it. There is no other one. If you look at the cryptocurrency space today, it is just not there, guys. And why did crypto exist in the first place? It existed to solve payments. And we still do not have that. XRP is the most efficient way because it also has Ripple behind it. So there are cryptocurrencies that reach a higher number of transactions per second. But you have to look at the bigger picture, right? We are dealing with regulation. We are dealing with Ripple as a company, which has multiple partnerships working with them, which are crucial to XRP being implemented as a world currency, right? Because that's what we're waiting for here. and we can see here, time to unseal the Hinman speech documents. Now, this video is still a bit, guys, but I just want to conclude the video here. You can clearly see, guys, this is a very interesting interview where you can really get some key nuggets from Brett Garlinghouse here. He's explaining what is going on right now, and it's not going to be long before we have a conclusion. Now, if you want to see more, guys, I will show the second part of the video in my next video. Thank you very much for watching this one. See you in the next one. Cheers.